Welcome to Golf Tips. My name is Trevor Moore, teaching professional with Advantage Golf Academy, located at Cottonwood Coulee Golf Course here in Medicine Hat. And I want to talk to you today about a question that shows up on the lesson tee every single day. People want to hit it further. That's just human nature. We want to hit the ball further, and people tend to do it one of two ways. They improve their swing technique through lessons or they head to the gym to get stronger. The thing that's interesting, when you head to the gym to get stronger, many people come back and the feedback we hear is, I am stronger, but I'm not hitting it further. Why is that? Well, there's kind of a culprit there. There's sort of a forgotten factor. And that forgotten factor is not just relevant in golf, it's relevant in everyday life and health. And that's why we have Dana Gackle here with Elevation Fitness and Crosstraining to talk about the forgotten factor. It's not all about strength. What's the answer?
Well, it's the one that's just as important as your strength, and that's flexibility.
Yeah, flexibility is really critical, isn't it? I had flexibility described to me one time, muscles being like a rubber band, and you have to be able to stretch the rubber band in order to be able to load up power. Now, as you build muscle strength, you create a thicker rubber band, which if you're not flexible, is harder to stretch.
It's tighter, for sure. So
Yeah.
if you don't focus on the flexibility component to that, for sure, it becomes tighter. So it is just as equally important. That's a foundation, really, as your strength and your flexibility.
Yeah, and not to downgrade the strength component, but the strength component's the easy answer. No one ever comes in and overstretches and under strength trains.
No.
It's always the other way around,
It's always
right?
the other way around.
Yeah, so when it comes to stretching, we want to take maybe today and we'll come back next week and talk about a second component of stretching, because stretching is something people often feel they do, but they don't do well enough, or it's just misunderstood. And the first answer being there's two types of stretching. One is the old school standard stretches, which still have relevance today, but when used appropriately. Standard stretching is static stretching.
Right.
What's static stretching?
That's more, like you said, what we're mostly used to or have seen when you're holding that stretch and you're trying to go a little bit deeper with that stretch, because that's your goal, is to get more flexible. So in order to do that, you need to do that stretching, hold that stretching, go a little deeper with that stretching.
So it's a very traditional stretching. It's the one that people often do the most but miss the second component. We'll talk about that next week. But when we look at golf, there's sort of two areas of concern for me as a golf pro. One, arm, hand, and wrist strength. The other one is sort of, core strength, the ability to rotate, not strength, pardon me, flexibility, and get that body turning properly. So can you maybe demonstrate a couple stretches that you think people can jump into statically that'll get the wrists and the core of the body involved?
For sure. When you're thinking of a static stretch for a wrist, for example, we've seen a lot of this type of movement where you can pull your hand towards yourself and hold that, and then you can bring your hand up and you're pulling your hand back again towards yourself and just holding. So this would be a good example of a static type of a stretch that would work your wrist, or even doing a rotation and you're holding.
Okay. So again, turning to the point where just bordering on discomfort, holding it, breathe through it, and get some stretching in there.
Right. So it really is that holding.
It is the holding, and it's the standard stretching we would normally do. Now, interesting to know, one of the most statistical answers here is that females on the golf course, one of the most common areas to injure themselves is wrists. Males, it's lower back. So if we looked at stretches, maybe really targeted towards everybody, but men specifically with rotation of the body, what would you recommend there?
Okay, well, you can do this with or without a golf club. So if you had a golf club, you could hold on to it and you can rotate and just hold, and then bringing it the other side and just hold.
And again, breathing throughout this, right?
Right.
Yes.
And that's another thing is, really concentrating on breath is a part of it, because it's so easy to forget to breathe and hold your breath and not realize.
As odd as it sounds, you're completely correct. We talk about that in the golf swing all the time. You're not breathing. Yes, I am. No, you're not. And we do forget that.
Yeah. And it is. You wouldn't think that you would forget that, but people do.
And I guess maybe we should clarify that we do breathe, we just don't breathe properly.
Right.
Is maybe the better answer. So a couple of good static stretches for us. We're going to come back next week and we're going to talk about a second type of stretching. Maybe you can preview that for us. What's next week's stretching called?
We are going to talk about dynamic stretching. So that's a different type of stretching, something that will come maybe before versus after.
Oh, gotcha. So the timing of where we stretch or how we stretch is important.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's it. Some static stretching. That's probably not new to anybody, but just a friendly reminder that it is critical to the golf swing. So tune in next week. We'll talk about some dynamic stretching, and that will probably really shape your mind a little bit differently. So see you next week.